Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Multifamily Hangout podcast. I'm your host, Adrian Danila. We want to thank our sponsors for making this podcast possible, and they are Apartment Snapshot, Kairos Water, and GPS Roof Leak Repairs. Thank you to all of you that came to join us today live. Everybody in the audience, we encourage you to leave us some comments, tell us where you're from, where you're watching us from today, and leave some comments and leave some questions for our guest. With this being said, I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, Mr. Chris Moreno. Take it away, sir.
Awesome. Thank you, Adrian. And, as we get to do every week, have an exceptional leader who comes on. But today, our guest, it's her first time on a podcast. I'm really excited to hear her story. She's got an exceptional journey throughout the multifamily industry. And one of the coolest things is she started off as a part-time leasing consultant in Atlanta, Georgia, right here where we're based in 2000. So really excited to hear some of her stories around determination, growth, and leadership. I think one of the doing some background before she came on the podcast today is hearing about her humbleness, her positivity, and then just her experience across the board. So without further ado, Kristina Davis, we're excited to have you and welcome you today.
Thank you so much to both of you for having me here. It's an honor to be here. I was honored to be asked, so I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, Kristina, I know obviously today your work as Vice President of Multifamily Operations at Fortis Property Management, you get to see an incredible vast array from the talent to people to properties. Could you take us through, a little bit of your journey, maybe how you got started in multifamily and real estate, and then how you evolved through your career? Love to hear it in your own words.
Absolutely. Back in 2000, I was a stay-at-home mom. I had a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And, it was challenging then to be able to have a career and pay for daycare. And it seemed like I was working to pay for daycare. So I ended up staying home with them for several years and got to a point where I was ready to venture back into, the working world. And it was by accident kind of that I ended up in multifamily. Like many of us, I think, just kind of stumble into it. My brother and my sister-in-law lived at a property, veranda on Acres Mill, which Adrian, you're familiar with, is Columns at Acres Mill. That was where I started out my career, and they had a part-time leasing position open. So I was able to work every weekend, leasing apartments and balance that. My husband watched the boys on the weekend while I was working, and that's how we kind of made it work. And that was my launching pad for my career in the multifamily industry. It was a great experience. It was a 400-unit property and lots going on all the time. I was supported by a good sized staff because of the size property. So I had a lot to learn from, a lot of people to kind of observe and develop my leasing skills and, my people skills, I guess, and go from there.
You're on mute, Adrian.
Of course, as always. Kristina, you had an amazing career. I want you to share with us some lessons, the most powerful lessons that you learned along the way in your amazing career.
So, I think the biggest thing that helped me kind of starting out and growing was observing, listening and observing and, learning from everyone that I came into contact with. And I had great role models and I had not so great. And you learn from both of them. And, you kind of learn what not to do, how certain behaviors from a leader make you feel. And then, what to do, what really helps you grow, what I responded well to, and what I didn't. And, like I said, I think you learn from everybody that you interact with, whether it's what to do or what not to do. I certainly had both of those in my career.
As you mentioned, going through these different roles in your career and different companies, right? Sure, there were a lot of differences you saw in leadership, as you mentioned, culture, and as you were listening, I'm kind of curious to hear, like, are there any stories that stand out around like some of the challenges maybe you saw in terms of, you know, the differences between different assets, or some of the challenges you came upon in like value add? So I kind of love to hear, you know, maybe some of those stories if you have one.
Sure. So, what comes to mind in particular is a property I had in Tucker, Georgia, that was a value add, a renovation, and they were pretty extensive renovations that we were doing. I came into the property after a regional and a manager that weren't performing were moved out of this asset, and found a team that was kind of in disarray, and the ownership was frustrated with even the maintenance supervisor and thought he needed to go too, and it was a significant challenge. But getting in there and taking the maintenance supervisor, walking the property with him, and getting him in units alone, walking the property, and getting to hear his perspective and his frustrations, and being able to work through it, and kind of turning that property around with him, and turning everyone's perspective on how he had been performing, because he was not led well. He was struggling with the leadership that he was in place with, and just being able to hear his side of things, help him kind of reset expectations of ownership, was huge. And that property ended up being a very successful value add asset. And when they were able to disposition it, made a significant amount for the investors on that property.
Kristina, we had here other leaders that started companies from scratch, took them to thousands or tens of thousands of units. One of the questions that I always like to ask is, how do you scale, right? How do you go from like zero, from nothing, to managing 15,000 units? So I want to ask you first, how many units are in your portfolio? How many apartment homes are you overseeing? And secondly, what type of things it takes to learn to become a leader, like you, right? Managing this large portfolio, from like being a manager and being a regional manager. So what are the things that are helping you go through the ranks and help you scale this position, right? Because it's one way to manage 300-400 apartments, another way to manage 1,000 and 3,000 and 5,000 and 10,000 units.
Sure. I would say that, achieving that scale it's critical to find the right team, get the right team on the bus. It's effective interviewing. It's managing expectations, or conveying your expectations, sharing the vision, and making sure that your team understands, like, here's our vision, here's our goal, here's our budget, here are the, KPIs that we're trying to achieve, and making sure that you have a team that's capable of achieving those, or that you're capable of getting, to that place, by coaching and training, mentoring. And then sometimes it's matching them up with peers that have similar skill sets, that can help get them to that place. I currently oversee properties in Austin and in Huntsville, Alabama directly, but we have, about 8,000 units in Fortis altogether, that I also support regional teams. And I think every one of them is, kind of in the same boat. What I love about Fortis is that all of the regionals that I work with now, almost all of them were property managers that I worked with when I was, a regional support person at First Community. So even when I was, a little farther down the ladder, they worked with me then. And so I've seen them grow in their career as I've grown, which is amazing. And I love it.
That's so cool. I love to hear those stories. And like you said, it's funny because you work at a company, you maybe go to another company, it could be seen as competition, but you stay friends, you stay connected. And that's what's great about this industry. It's so large, right? It's always growing, and there's opportunities, and oftentimes people move on in their career. I love what you said about interviewing, starting. It's all about where you start and building on that foundation you talked about. I'd love to hear, how do you think about, you talked about hiring, how do you think about the culture once people are coming on board? Do you have a process around culture or a process around mentorship and those peers within the organization?
We do. We actually have a couple of different methods, I guess, that we use. So we have a focus group that we use. We've kind of tabled it for now because things got a little crazy over the winter time, and we had lots of changes happening with some of our systems in the background. But we do have a focus group that we typically meet monthly to talk about, concerns. So that is a kind of a form of mentoring. It's, hearing a diverse group of, our maintenance team members, our site team members, be it property managers, assistant managers, leasing, so that they all have a say and look, this isn't working, or this is working really well, or this is how we can improve this process. I think that's one of the things, but we also have a mentoring program where we partner up, in specific regions. We have identified a mentor that will work with onboarding a new property manager or a new assistant manager, new leasing consultants, so that they have kind of the buddy system. They can learn the Fortis way, and then, and ask questions and, bounce things off of a peer without feeling like they're having to go to their supervisor and maybe, feeling awkward or not asking a question that they probably should, because they feel like they don't want to look like they don't know what they're doing. It can be awkward. So we want to take that away.
Kristina, I want to stay a little bit with your current role and your current company, Fortis. What are some things that you would say to someone that might consider working for Fortis? What makes Fortis different, and what are some differentiators that will make them choose your company? And the second part of the same question I have for you for company owners, like for investors that are they're shopping around for a third-party company. What are some things that you would tell investors to attract them towards Fortis as managing agent?
Sure. So, as far as an investor, certainly it's, we look at each property like we own it. It's an ownership mentality. When we're looking at financials, it's, we're looking for those opportunities, and it may be other income. Are we, is pet fees, or, what are we missing, versus our submarket, where are the opportunities? But we absolutely look at each asset like it's our own. And that's, when I say we, Katie and I, our COO, work very closely together. We, one of the things that we have implemented is an asset optimization meeting where every 6 weeks or so we rotate. Each week we've got a meeting set up with a regional and their property manager so that we connect with them on Zoom and we're looking at them face to face. Well, and it changes. There's not a set structure, but we look at financials sometimes. Sometimes it's, maybe specific CapEx issues or, troubleshooting if there's something that they're having, they're seeing challenges with in their specific submarket. It's about support. It's about, mentoring again. And then, just having that FaceTime and being able to have conversations and say, this is what's really happening in my market. And I'm having a hard time with it. What can we do to, as a team to kind of work through it and give them some suggestions?
Love to hear, how do you think, as you're thinking about ways to make your teams better and even improve your operations, what are some of the ways you stay updated on industry trends? What are some of the best practices like that to, always stay up on the hottest things and stay ahead of what's coming down the pipe?
I think podcasts are a great way to stay ahead of trends. Certainly industry meetings, apartment association meetings, just even, site meetings with vendors, hearing, what's going on in the market. And then, as you mentioned, staying in touch with former colleagues, and to see what they're doing, what they're hearing, what they're implementing. And it's just having those conversations, building those, relationships, maintaining those relationships and networking. I think it's huge.
Kristina, for someone that's looking up to you or to someone like you, a leader, an executive, someone that, made it to the very top, what are some great tips or some great pieces of advice that you have? They want to become Kristina one day.
I would say show up. When I was on site, I was typically the first one in the office. And not that that's the greatest way to be or necessarily the healthiest way to be, but I was always there for my team. I was there first thing in the morning when they're coming in to get coffee or grumbling or whatever dragging in the morning, to talk about the day. What's our plan? Here's what we have going on this week, and getting a plan of attack together, and helping them figure out how we're going to execute that plan, whatever it is for the week. But I would say, show up. That's number one. And, try and have a positive attitude. It's not always easy. Property management is, I like to say there's no crying in property management. Like that's my joke with my managers, but there is. We know there's tears, and it's making the best out of every day. And every day is a fresh start. So okay, yesterday was awful. Here we go today. Today's onward and upward. It's going to be better. I think just maintaining that kind of positive attitude. And just, keep on keeping on. Sometimes that's all you can do, make those little adjustments so that you maybe get more traffic the next day, or you get more work orders done the next day, or, whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, making those little adjustments so that you get where you need to go.
Love that. Love the, as you said, the story shares and the emotion. And I think a lot of people try to say, take the emotion out of business, but you're spot on. Like it's reality. Yeah. And you have to be passionate about what you get, and people are going to, feel that way. I'm kind of curious to know, like, are there any stories you could share or experiences you've had that maybe it was an emotional time and then maybe there's some very successful outcome? Feel free to name it. Maybe it was I always think about like when we build something, right? We're literally building physical things. And when you still drive by, you think about that experience. Was there any, tough experience or great experiences you'd love to share? Oh gosh,
there's so many different things, and probably some that I can't share on a live podcast, but it is property management and it's crazy sometimes.
Maybe around, like, I was going to say too, maybe, around new construction or about maybe taking over a new property too, and working with a new team. I think that's always a big challenge too.
It is. Yeah. I think, taking over a property, working with a new team, it's about, again, observing, getting into that property and, listening to whatever it is that the challenges are. And again, putting a plan together, particularly I had a property in Jonesboro, Georgia, that was a former tax credit community that went into receivership, and we took it over, and it was kind of a mess. But we were able to get the right team on the bus, had a property manager that really was a superstar. She's a regional now with another management company. She's fabulous. And I'm so proud of her as I've watched her career kind of blossom. It's amazing to me. But yeah, that property was challenging. We ended up taking it down into the 60s in occupancy in order to renovate and reposition and get that property where it needed to be. And it was a very successful disposition for ownership. So it was a great story. It was a great triumph for that whole team. I was really proud of how it was executed. It wasn't always easy. Most of the time it wasn't easy, but we got it there.
You mentioned it wasn't easy. Obviously, it's not easy. A lot of challenges. You're up against a lot. Like, it's tough. It's actually rough, very rough. So I want to ask you, Kristina, what are some things that help you motivate the team? What kept the team in place, and what made them stay motivated, and what made the team become so successful, turn things around in such a matter? What were some things that really helped getting those amazing results?
I think it's communicating, again, having that vision and conveying it to the team so they know this is our goal, setting incremental goals also. So, okay, we're at 65% occupancy and we need to be at 95. How are we going to get there? and kind of backing into the numbers. This is what we need to drive traffic wise to achieve so many leases per week or per month, and establish those goals and celebrate the wins. And even if we maybe miss a goal, we're still celebrating the achievements we have made. I think that's huge. I think it's also huge that the team knows that they have the support of their regional manager, of ownership, and particularly this property had great support from ownership. I mean, they were out on site, maybe not weekly, but 2 or 3 times a month. So they knew they had that support. They knew that we had their back, and if the pool needed to be skimmed, I was out there doing it, so they could be out there punching units or whatever it takes. And I think that's kind of the theme of these success stories, is that they have a team of people, a group of people that come together and are willing to do what it takes. There's never, that's not my job. That's not something that we say ever. We all pick up trash. My kids pick up trash. We don't step over garbage anywhere we are. It's just how they were raised. And that's, because, I've been in property management almost their whole life. So they just know. And it's that way with my teams.
Amazing. And I think that's really cool, because I think about a lot about jobs people don't want to do. You think about getting on an airplane and cleaning the trash after everyone gets out the turn, like you said, punching the units. You're on property, nothing's built, behind, above you. I always kind of say I'm the chief garbage picker upper. I'd love to hear though, how you think about mentorship, because I think learning about these types of things and this kind of thought process and demystifying some of these thoughts, oh, I'm too busy for that, I should delegate that. So how do you think about mentorship? Number one, what advice do you have for people who are looking for a mentor, and what the best way for them to find those types of people to instill these beliefs and values?
Absolutely. I've had some great mentors in my career. And as I mentioned earlier, I've had some not so great examples too, that I've learned from. But I think you look around you, and I learn from my teams every day. It's not that, it goes both ways, so I think that there's no substitute for time in the business. I think that you learn every day, every week, every year. All of us are learning, and because everything, things change all the time. But I do, I think for mentorship, look around you, go to the apartment association meetings, and look around you and just, put your hand out and introduce yourself. And, I ran into Adrian at an apartment association meeting in January, and I knew him through my son, who worked with him at ECI as a maintenance tech. So, it's easy to network when you put yourself out there and you get out to those events and just say hello. And again, you're looking around you when you're on site. It's not just about learning from someone that's above you. It can be a peer at another property. It can be, a leasing consultant who has experience in something similar. Their mentors are all around.
Kristina, I want to take a look at current market conditions, and I want to ask you, what do you see for current challenges and opportunities in 2 ways? In one way, what are the challenges and opportunities for owners and investors? And secondly, for operators, you being an operator, like a third-party operator, you see both sides. You see the struggles and the opportunities that might come, investors' ways, and at the same time, you are actually dealing with challenges and you're seeing opportunities for you as an operator. So if you want to elaborate on that.
Sure. So, some of the challenges, and it's kind of covers both for an investor and an operator. We've seen delinquency issues in particular markets, where evictions are super slow to happen these days. Some of them painfully slow. 6-8 months longer. And it's awful. It is awful to have these massive amounts sitting on the books, and that you have someone just sitting in there and daring you to set them out, and they know they've got you. that's super frustrating. And I think that we have been successful in looking for, tougher ways to do screening so that, you avoid it on the front end. You don't ever give them keys, if they're someone who's kind of been in that situation in the past. Just being very, very careful about the screening process. We've got those, checks and balances in place, so we don't ever move them in. But yeah, I think that's going to continue to be a challenge in certain markets. I think, Austin, we haven't really seen the delays in evictions. It's more occupancy. There's such oversupply there. We've got a lease up that is, pushing 70% occupied right now. We're trying to get it leased up. And as we come, head into leasing season, hopefully that'll get there pretty quickly. But we're up against 5 other lease ups. So it's very challenging. We're trying to keep up with the Joneses, and, everybody's kind of upping their specials, their concessions. So it's staying on top of trends. It's, making sure that we're doing everything we can to get the leases that are available out there to get traffic in the door and provide homes for those prospective residents.
Very cool. There's something around, again, they say when you don't necessarily always remember what people say, but you always remember the way people make you feel. And as you talked about finding the right people and the culture, even though a lot of times we're remote or we're traveling or between properties, that journey can feel really lonely for different people in the organization. What's maybe helped you keep going through your career, and how you try to, make others feel positive?
I would say my family has always been the driving force for me. I have 3 boys and been married for 25 years this week. And so that has always been my driving force. It's about them, and I always want to make them proud. I always want to act with integrity. And, I expect the same from my teams. I think that in today's environment, Zoom is our best friend. Having these video calls, I can connect with, with my teams in Austin, with my teams in Huntsville, and I have weekly calls with my managers to make sure that they get FaceTime, even though, they've never met in person, because they're states away from each other. They know each other very well. And, it's amazing that we have these tools these days. Back in the day when I, was on rent roll, and, there was nothing, we didn't have those connections with sister properties. And as a matter of fact, Veranda, I was on a little island. We're the only property in Atlanta. So there was no one to go to that was nearby with that management company at that time. So I do think we have a lot of tools and resources that kind of expand our horizons and allow us to pool our resources and our knowledge that we didn't have back then.
Kristina, I want you to take us into the future a little bit. I want to discuss some trends, right? What are some major trends that you see in the industry? We're already at the end of Q1 in 2024, so we have 3 more quarters. But what do you see for the rest of the year and then beyond 2024 for major trends happening in the industry?
I think AI has been, kind of the buzzword. I think that we'll continue to see that evolve. I think it's got more work to do. I've listened to calls. We've rolled out some AI technology on, the chatbots and some of our leasing tools when we're receiving leasing phone calls in our offices, and there's still frustration. It's still not where it needs to be just yet, because it's not super intuitive, and sometimes it's not understanding what people are asking, and so we're not 100% all in on AI just yet. I think we'll get there, but yeah, I think there's still a lot of frustration with callers right now when they get the robot on the phone. So hopefully we'll see more kind of move in that direction. I do think it's huge, to take some of the easy questions, that AI can answer for our teams. Do you accept pets? What are your breed restrictions? Things like that we answer over and over again, and we can dedicate our leasing staff that's in the office to the tours, and giving the very best presentation when we've got someone face to face, and maybe taking care of some of those questions ahead of time, through AI. I think that would be huge. I do think maintenance will benefit from some of the predictive analytics that are kind of in the pipeline. I think that will be huge too, and I'm excited to see where that goes in the future. But I do think we'll continue to see some of these, AI is going to be the big driver. And then maybe centralization as well. We have not delved into that at Fortis just yet. We've talked about it, maybe down the road in specific markets where we maybe have an assistant manager that can handle a couple of assets to try it and see how that goes. It's not something we've rolled out just yet, but we are kind of toying with the idea.
It's interesting. As we were talking, obviously about these different topics, one of which I'm curious to know, about mentorship. Is there someone in your life that you could maybe call on? They don't have to be in the industry. Is there someone in life who is maybe a major influential person on your life? Maybe there's a couple, but I'd love to hear some stories. I think those are always people, how they make an impact in your life and how you remember that.
So, I mean, hands down, it's my mom is number one influencer in my life. And, sometimes, we're best friends, and sometimes we're not so much best friends. But she has, she became a single mom when I was in second grade, and put herself back into school and worked 2 jobs to take care of my brother and I. And that's what we grew up watching, that kind of dedication. And so, hands down, she would be, the biggest influence on who I am today, just because that's who I grew up kind of emulating, and it's all about, again, about family, that you do what you have to do to take care of those that you love. But, secondly, I have so many people that I can, and there's former employers that I know that I can call on anytime, if I have a question, that they are there for me. And I'm so grateful to have those, they're industry greats, and I know that they're there for me if I need them, and that's enormous. So yeah.
Kristina, I want to stay with centralization a little bit. You already shared with us that you haven't really started any major centralization initiatives. So I want to get your take on the issue of centralization, right? Do you see this as being just a buzzword? Is it a real thing? How extensive could it be? Or is it somewhere in between? And maybe I'd like to get your take on centralization in maintenance. Do you see that happening, and how do you envision that to happen?
So, I have heard some of the build to rent, I know, have, used kind of a centralized maintenance platform, to help troubleshoot, where I think they're a little bit less involved than we are in multifamily in getting out and addressing concerns for residents. It's more, okay, here, your toilet's clogged. Here's how you shut it off, that kind of thing, and walking them through how to do that remotely, resetting breakers and that kind of thing. I do think we'll see some of that. For me, I don't know how you balance the customer service side of things. I think that our residents, particularly in A-class properties, demand, that we're there, that we're responsive, that we're coming out as quickly as possible to address their concerns. So I don't know that there's going to be this kind of hands-off, we centralize everything and that's just the way it's going to be. I think there's going to be balance. I think it's going to depend on the asset class and the market. And, do you have boots on the ground to support that centralization when things go sideways, because they're bound to,
Interesting as you talk about that, because there's so many different aspects and operations, and also do business and growing the company. How do you think, as you talked about just now about the various asset classes, and then you could have similar asset classes in different markets and how different those could be, right? Because you're in incredible markets, right? Whether it's Alabama, Texas, the Southeast. I'm kind of curious to know, how do you balance the intent to grow with the right properties and the right teams? Do you have kind of Feel free. I understand if you can't share everything, your secret playbook, but do you have any secrets you could share with us about how Fortis and how you think about that?
Like as far as building a bench so that we have room to grow down the road.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whether it's the expansion of the company or expanding the bench, both of those I think are really powerful things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, share what you feel comfortable sharing. I know
Sure. It's,
secrets.
it's a constant conversation. I think that we, and again, we meaning Katie and I, our COO, we're constantly having conversations about paths for employees. This might be a good path for them. If this happens and we grow in this market, then this is what we want to see happen. And it may be that we're 10 steps ahead of ourselves. But I think having those conversations and talking through that thought process, and then, once you kind of map out what if we grew here, then this person might be a good fit for this. I think then you can really start to build the groundwork to develop that employee and, and say, without maybe saying, this is, we want you to learn how to do this. We want to see you grow. So we're going to start cross-training you and, in handling payables or whatever it is, whatever that career path is for them. But I do think it's important to have that bench built so that, when growth comes, you're ready to take the next step. Because if you're gaining properties and you don't have anybody to staff or to supervise or to train, you're missing the mark.
Kristina, next I want to go back a little bit. You mentioned AI. So I want to have a conversation about technology in general, right? More of a general conversation about prop tech. I was at a conference like 3-4 months ago, and one of the roundtables was around, one of the panels was around too much technology. I'm going to explain. So one of the panelists was saying, well, we're basically having companies, even our company has this challenge to where the expectation for an entry-level employee, a leasing agent, right, the most entry-level person, it's expected to be proficient in 57 pieces of software. And then the next person on the panel said, okay, well, at 57, you're still good because our number is 63. So technology is amazing, really. It could be a great enhancer. Now, COVID has pushed a lot of technology into our industry to kind of fill this void that we had from the lack of personal interaction. I get that. I think that, maybe a reassessment of like how much technology is needed, might be needed. Do you see the same type of amount of technology that people need to absorb? Like, is that your experience? And then what can we do to kind of, I guess, mitigate this, because it becomes a point to where we end up punishing people with technology instead, like helping them?
Sure. So, yeah, I do think that there is absolutely the possibility of overdoing it, that we kind of went crazy with all of the different options for, self-guided tours and, and video tours and, just the many different things. I think that one thing Fortis has done well is to not go overboard. And we've really tried to streamline our processes, using the platform that we use, kind of centralizing there, where we were using one company for, background checks and another one for, the leasing process, and another one for, CRM, and kind of merging all of those into one tech stack has made things simpler for our teams, because there is a lot. I mean, just the onboarding classes, with fair housing and, all of the different classes that we ask them to take. And sometimes it's 2 weeks, that, they've got 47 classes to take. And so we really have worked to streamline, okay, here's the top 3. We need to get those done within, 2 weeks. And then over the next, 3 months, these are the other classes. And, let's take one every other week or whatever it is. We want them to have the knowledge that they need to be successful, but we also don't want to drown them in the knowledge that we want them to have. So, I think there's a balance. I do think that, like you said, Adrian, that it's absolutely appropriate to evaluate and scale back where you can, because it should be a benefit to our teams and to our residents and our prospects, and not a hindrance.
Amazing. I am remiss to ask you about this, because obviously you have so many great nuggets. Obviously you think a lot about process and people. I was curious to get your thoughts on maybe a leader you listen to, or a speaker, a podcast or book that maybe you've listened to recently that you'd love to share with the audience that you really enjoy, or have maybe gotten some good nuggets out of.
Let me see, most recently, and this can be a little controversial, Jack Welch, he's Neutron Jack, and he went into GE and made a lot of changes, but I think that he also had a lot of really solid ways of bringing out, his leadership, that he worked with, bringing out the best in them, identifying their strengths and their weaknesses, and helping them get to the next level, or figuring out, hey, this might not be the best fit for you. And sometimes you have to have those conversations, and it's not fun. But that is, I've read a couple of his books most recently, and that's the one that just kind of popped into my head.
Kristina, one of the challenges that we're facing as an industry in general, and I think the most affected area of the industry is when it comes to qualified maintenance personnel, is shortages, right? Tell me your thoughts on labor shortages, challenges that we have. How do we overcome those challenges?
Well, as a mom who sent my son to HVAC, school, he went to Chat Tech and got his certification, and ended up doing, maintenance for apartments. Not at any of my companies. He worked for other companies, and I had nothing to do with getting him hired there. But, I think it's about teaching our kids, and particularly my son was ADHD, and so working in an office is never going to work for him. He's got to have something different. Problem solving, troubleshooting is absolutely, he was taking things apart as soon as he could walk. So it just made sense. And so that was kind of the direction I encouraged him to go in, and he did. And he's been super successful. I'm really proud of him. But, I think it's teaching, the next generation that it's, working in trades it's lucrative. There's something different every day. It's never the same thing. And you really do get to make a difference in people's lives. When you have a resident who's frustrated, and you can kind of turn their attitude around, by getting their AC going again, and all of a sudden, they're cool, and you've really changed their perspective on things. It's a huge win. And, it can be challenging for sure. When you get the calls that a sprinkler line has burst at 2 a.m, it's not fun. But I think it can also be super rewarding. And I think it's getting out in the high schools. I think it's just spreading the word, because I think a lot of people don't really, they're thinking doctors and lawyers, and there's so much money to be made in this business, for maintenance too. And I think it's just getting out there and spreading that word.
As you just mentioned with your son, and I definitely, if we get to it, love to hear more advice about raising kids, because I got 3 little tiny ones right now. One's almost about to turn a year old. It was so interesting, as you said, the trades, we have a shortness of labor. A lot of people are moving into technology and software, and you can't just run the real estate world with just software, right? We need people to actually do work. What are your thoughts about, having, thinking about integrating software, but not, still having the human aspect of it, having the hospitality piece? Or do you feel that hospitality is in the human touch, and having people physically there is such an important part of our business? Or is your take that we do need to really, we have a software mentality at our companies? Love to kind of hear how you balance that and what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I do think there's a balance. I think that, people want, it drives me crazy to call and get, a robot on the phone. And that's just me, Gen Xer, like I if I'm calling, I want to talk to a person, so otherwise I'll email you. But yeah, I do think there's a balance. I think that, I don't know that leasing offices are ever going to go away. I think that it's, people want to see, they want to know who's taking care of them. They want to walk in and feel that someone cares, that they're making a huge decision when they choose to sign a lease with us and, live with us for 14 months. It's a big part of their life. It's a big decision for them. And I think it's not something that you can kind of delegate to a machine. I think they need to have that personal interaction. So yeah, I don't think that that's going to go away. I don't think that our prospects are going to be okay with that going away completely. I do think there'll be a balance, and maybe we do, centralize more leasing and follow up so that, you're having that back and forth via email or phone before they show up in the office, but there's still going to be a model. I think there's still going to be tours. They want to see where they're going to live. They want to see their neighbors. They want to see what the amenities are. I don't think it's going to go away. I think there'll be a balance.
So, Kristina, my last question was about recruiting, right? How do we bring in talent, new blood in the industry? Next, I want to ask you about how do we retain the current talent? Because, right, although for sure we have to focus on bringing in new blood because we need, we have so much of a need to bring new blood in. What do we do for our current employees? What do we do for them so they could stay longer and they're not actually leaving not just our companies, but at times they're leaving the industry. They're going for a different industry.
Yeah, it's, specifically with maintenance, it's a real concern because, like we said, being on call and getting called at 2 a.m, and when they can go to a HVAC company and not ever have to take call again or not have to deal with the compactor that's overflowing. I think it's understanding, it's providing sufficient, staffing to have the manpower that's needed on site. I think that's a big source of frustration. When we have an open position, moving quickly to fill it so that they're not left feeling like, they're a one-man band, trying to handle everything. I think that's huge. It's, I'm sorry, I just completely drew a blank what I was about to say next. I'm running out of steam. But yeah, I think it's huge to have that support. Salary is absolutely a consideration, with our maintenance teams. Salaries have gone up quite a bit. And when you have that team member in place and you have not made adjustments to keep them kind of up to speed with the market, it's going to end up, biting you in the butt. And we have found that we've had to reevaluate during budget time, and really digging in and looking at our, across the board, our site teams, what their salaries are. And we've made adjustments, in the past to get them up to what we know that submarket is paying, to be fair. And then, not walking your team because you're not paying them what they're worth.
Yeah, it's always reevaluating, right? You
Yes.
can't be complacent in your business. You need to, be aware, self-aware as well. I think you hit on, a few things around obviously innovation, AI, software, challenges with new technology. I'm here actually in Atlanta at a event, and there are tons of prop tech startups. There's investors, there's real estate owners, people coming together. Obviously, you said you love to be up on technology. For startups listening, oftentimes people, especially this being the end of the quarter, people are banging on people's doors. How do you like to think about that? How do you like to kick off, or to help maybe some people in the audience who are thinking about reaching out and working with your organization? How do you like to have those conversations? And do you have a process, like when you're thinking about it? Like, do you like to say, hey, we're going to evaluate this many companies a quarter or this many companies this year and divine specific areas? What are your kind of tips for them?
So I don't know that there's we don't have a criteria, a certain number of companies we're going to evaluate, quarterly. But I do think that when we see a need, or maybe we don't even know there's a need, but we receive an email, or we hear from a colleague that this is really working well, or this helped fix this problem that we were experiencing, and we know that this exists in our world too. Then maybe it's something that we reach out to kind of dig into a little bit more. We do receive a ton of emails, with new startups reaching out, and I always make an effort to try and respond, but sometimes it just gets to be a lot. I think it's stating the benefit, like it's knowing your product, knowing what it's fixing, by existing, and that's what's going to get attention. If they're trying to grow their business, it's kind of putting out there, rather than a little link saying schedule time on my calendar, which kind of makes me crazy when I get those emails. But let's just, I would say, this is what we can help you fix. We know this is a problem. Coming out with those solutions would be huge.
Kristina, for a young person getting ready to enter the real life, I call the real life the life after high school or maybe college. They went to college. They're ready to take their first, real job, full-time job, take on responsibility. What are the best pieces of advice that you could share?
I would say listen and observe. If you're getting out into any business and you want to grow, I heard it on another guest podcast a week or so ago. Listen more than you speak, and I think that's huge. I think that's excellent advice, because you don't know everything. You don't know what you don't know. And so when you're listening, you're going to pick up on things that you had no idea were a thing. And I think that's excellent advice. Ask questions, and listen and observe. I think those are the biggest things. And then, acting with integrity, do what you say you're going to do. I think that builds trust with your teams. I think it builds trust with your supervisors. Being responsive also. We don't ignore emails. We call people back when we're supposed to, those kind of things. But being responsive, and integrity, listening and observing, for sure.
Love that. I still actually leave people voice messages. I think I left one this morning for someone, especially for my mom and my uncle. So, they don't even have FaceTime sometimes on their phone, so I have to figure out other ways to get in touch. I think one of the biggest things I think about right now, and is what impact do you want to leave on the world? And I'm curious to know, how do you think about legacy, or how do you think about, as you're building your career and handing off the baton to someone else? What are your thoughts on that, and the impact you want to leave on the multifamily in real estate industry?
I think it's building the next generation of leaders. I don't know that there's any great legacy that I have, kind of mapped out in my head that I want to leave, but I always want to carry myself in a way that, again, with integrity, and, sharing the knowledge that I have just from the time in the business. Again, there's no substitute for time in. I think that you learn so much as you go, because there's things that you can't necessarily teach. It's just, you encounter obstacles in your career, and you kind of figure out, either talking to your peers or mentors, or, working through those things on your own. I think it's time in, it's, building the next generation of leaders, and kind of pouring into them what you can, and helping them kind of get to the next steps in their career.
Kristina, one of the things that I don't think we talk enough in society in general is failure, right? The fact that failure is part of processes of getting to successes, getting through the finish line. So I want you to share with us a situation where a failure or a perceived failure help you overcome. How did you turn that around and help you overcome and turn that into a success?
Oh, just trying to think of a good example. I feel like there's been failures, but you pivot. It's you pivot and you figure out what's next. Okay, so we're not going to do that again. What didn't work? Moving forward, what changes now? Where do we go from here? And I think in any situation, that's kind of the mentality to take. It's acknowledging whatever the concern is, whatever the failure was, and what do we do about it next? So we don't repeat it. Not that we're going to beat someone up over it, but let's figure it out and let's not do that anymore. And where do we go from here?
I think you talked about earlier about the impact of being in real life business pre-COVID, then it was remote, and then there was a rush to get back in person. I'd love to hear your thoughts, on maybe some of the things you're looking forward to in real life this year. Are there certain events or team get-togethers? You mentioned having your calls every week with your team. Are there certain things you look forward to where you get people together as a team, or even other industry experts that you like to get to?
We are actually planning a group event with our regionals, from the Carolinas, from all over in July. So I'm looking forward to that, just to have that FaceTime with them, because we do, like I said, we've got our asset optimization calls where we see them on a regular basis. We have weekly calls with all of our teams, but it's not the same as getting together in person. So we are looking forward to that. That'll be in July.
Kristina, as we're approaching the top of the hour and the end of this great conversation, I want to give you the opportunity to share with us some final thoughts, and maybe if you want to answer a question that you wish we would have asked and we didn't have the opportunity to.
Final thought. I mean, I don't know. I think we've covered quite a bit. I think this business it's very rewarding. You have the opportunity sky's the limit. When you get into property management, you get out of it what you put into it. So if you are willing to work hard and, like I said, show up, be responsive, the opportunities are there, and you don't have to have a fancy degree. It's just getting in there and listening and observing, and kind of monkey see, monkey do. Like you're watching those that are successful and emulating that, and then you're able to be successful as well. But I think there's so many people that are amazing in this business that have their hand out and they're willing to help pull you along as they move up the ladder, as they grow and learn. They're willing to share their experiences with you. So take advantage of that. I think that's huge.
Chris Moreno, any final thoughts?
Oh, I want to get more advice, personally on raising my kids. So that's my job number one is raising good kids to be good stewards of the world. And I'd love them to get into multifamily. I think our technology as well. But so yeah, I'd love to hear more stories from you in the future where we can talk about that offline. But this is a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us. Thanks for sharing some of your secrets, some of your stories. It's not easy. And thank you for joining us as your first podcast ever.
Yes.
That was amazing. So I know we're going to get some great feedback. So
thank you so much.
To you, Adrian.
Kristina, thank you very much for joining us today. Everybody, for all of you that were able to join us today, I understand during the podcast that LinkedIn had, a glitch, like not allowing everybody that had a link to log in. So we apologize on behalf of LinkedIn, but that was something we couldn't prevent. But there were people that were on the podcast, so we want to thank you all. Thank you all of you that show up. Thank you all of you that tried. We will see you next week, and hopefully LinkedIn does better for us. I do want to thank our sponsors, Apartment Snapshot. Kairos Water, and GPS Roof Leak Repairs for the partnership and making this podcast possible. We hope to see you back here next week. Mary Gwynn with Apartment Dynamics is going to be our next guest, another amazing guest. And we hope that you have a great rest of your day. Take care.